So welcome everybody to the webinar we have going today about reusing your designs with SOLIDWORKS PDM. All right. I'll go through a couple housekeeping things and then I will right into it. We have a half an hour planned, and it should be a pretty packed half an hour. So just as an introduction, I'm not a big fan of this slide. There seems to be a lot of alphabet soup. I want you to take away from the fact that of all this information up here, the 17 years of experience. Basically, I am a long-time SOLIDWORKS reseller engineer. I've touched almost every mechanical tool in the product, including a lot of the non-CAD based tools. So I've got a chance here to put my experience to your good use. Um, so today, um, the goal of today is to really talk about um, data reuse and why is it important and how do we actually achieve it? How does PDM help us out? All right. So the thing I want to keep at the forefront of our mind is that today is actually about money. Um, the design reuse comes in as a great way to save money because every design that we have, save money, recycle, every design that we have costs money to sit there and actually do the design. Every part number, takes some time to design. Takes time to enter into and maintain in our ERP system, and takes up space and dollars in our stockroom. And I've been in many instances where the designs that are actually in play, the company will design their own machines that they run for their production. And the stockroom here could have geometrically equivalent parts that are just stocked in different bins under different numbers because people didn't reuse designs. So I've been in customers where a machine would go down and they didn't realize that the proper part actually existed because it was being stocked under a different number. So how can we actually go through and use our uh, designs more effectively? All right. So good reuse of parts starts with good search results. All right. Good search results require good data. And we're going to go through how PDM can actually help you with that in a couple of different ways, a few different ways, really. All right, how can it automate some of the data? What ways can it assist you to make things easier? And then on the management side, how can we actually verify that the data exists? That's a fun one. Engineers might not like to hear that one, but on the management side, it's a wonderful thing. uh, so to start out with, in PDM, I'm going to go under the assumption that not everybody attending today is actually in PDM. The first explanation here is kind of for those of you who might not be aware, but PDM has a concept of data cards. And when I'm in a sales situation, the way I always talk about data cards is data cards are a way to collect any information that you want. So we've got this word soup up here, all these little things that are going to help us search and are going to help us in our jobs. How do we make good use of all of these things? Well, anything that goes into your title block should be in a data card. Anything that goes into your bill of material should be in a data card, or anything that is in that you want to be able to search on should be in your data card. And that's really where our focus is going to be today. It's the same mechanism for all three examples, but today we need good search results so that we can reuse the existing parts and save ourselves some money. All right. So we'll start out with automation. What can PDM do without any necessary input from the engineers. Simple things are automatic. Names and dates, those we can capture very, very easily. All right? As well as we can bring in information from other data cards. Okay, so I'm actually going to start out in SolidWorks, and I have a ton of stuff open here. Let's go right to SolidWorks. All right, I like to do a lot of stuff live if possible. I've got time today to do a few things live, so I'm actually just going to create a brand new model here in SolidWorks. And if you knew how many blocks and bricks I have in my vault, because I use this all the time. So I'll create a new block, all right, a new little widget. I'll throw a material onto it, and I'll save it into my vault, which happens to be, for me, sitting on my C drive. All right, now when I save it in here, the system is going to present me, if I could double click properly, there we go. All right. The system is going to present to me a data card. All right, now the disclaimer that I always make, this is my data card for my demo vault. These are 100% customizable, and towards the end, I'm actually going to show you the administration tool and how these things are rearranged and added and subtracted from. So if you haven't been in PDM, you haven't been through an implementation process, just know that this is an example I came up with to suit my demonstration needs. We can add a ton of information to this if need be. Just to take a quick look at what's already here, though. All right, we have information that's already been populated. I'm logged in as system admin, so it doesn't say JP, which are my initials. It actually says system admin. Captures today's date. Automatically also captured material and weight. There is a lot of good handshaking back and forth between SOLIDWORKS and PDM, as you would expect. So just the fact I threw in the material spec on this little model, I'm already capturing more data that will help me search later on. All right, so this is a very simple example. Now, some things are going to be entered manually, like a description. This is normally a typed-in field, but we'll go through other options for that as well. All right. Now, I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to pull up a slightly different version of that data card. All right, so I'm going to create another little widget here. I'll throw in any old material, doesn't really matter. And I'm going to save this into a different location for the purposes of pulling up this card. Now, what I want to focus on here is the information down here at the bottom. Okay, this is populated information from the folder that the file is stored in. So we can pull down information automatically without the engineer having to do anything manually, which is key. This, if you're not in PDM, the concept here, all right, we have data cards that represent our files. We have data cards that represent our folders. I save the file into this folder right here, so you can see I've got project number, names, and a few other pieces of information. They are automatically brought down and captured in the data card for the part file that goes into it as well. Okay, so those are just some really quick automated ways to grab data. All right, so we have some semi-automated ways. The first one is lists. Okay, so in the picture to the left, that is what it looks like in the administration tool, and the picture on the right is what it looks like for the end user. But we all know engineers can't type or spell. I can say that I am actually a degreed engineer, so I'm I'm allowed to poke fun at myself. Now, there are two different versions of PDM. There is PDM Standard and there's PDM Professional. The picture on the left that shows the administration list. For those of you who are in PDM standard, that piece does not exist, but the ability to have drop-down lists on your data cards, even in PDM standard, does absolutely exist. So how do these things actually work from an engineer's perspective? From the setup perspective, there's a little more to it, but from the engineer's perspective, how does this actually look and work? I'm going to go back to this little bugger, the first little brick that we made. And right from SOLIDWORKS, I'm actually going to pull up the data card. All right. I have some interesting interactions between these pieces of data in this little block right here. So up top, I've got a little radio button, as they're called, manufactured versus purchased. And as I start to turn these things on or off, you can see how some of the fields below are actually activating or deactivating. I have everything shown so that the engineers know everything exists. I use this for my demos, where I am actually activating or deactivating certain fields. You can actually hide and show fields as well. But what this does is this gives us an opportunity to pull from drop-down lists. Okay, there's a couple different drop-down lists. Some of the drop-down lists are you are stuck with what's in the list, so the administrator is 100% in control of the list. Other ones, you have the ability to pick from a list, or if you don't like what you see here, you can type in something different. In this case here, I could probably spell Standardize at this point in my life, but there might be a couple other ones that I would mistype. All right, this is actually a great example. This is a real-world example from a customer who shall remain nameless. When I did a data migration for one of my other customers, they had 12 different ways to type in the same paint spec. So in this example here, if I choose paint as my finish, the paint spec lights up. I've got my paints listed here, and now I've got the consistency I need to get good search results. All right. On the other side, if we go to purchase, purchase lights up a vendor dropdown. All right, and we have a list of vendors to pull from and an ability to type in a vendor part number. Okay. So those are some simple lists. Okay. We do have the ability to create some more interesting lists. So if I come into the vault, into any one of these folders here, all right, I have the data card displayed, and I'm going to do this for a data card. You don't have to do this. This could be for a part file as well. Okay. All right. So down here, I have a drop down for job number. Okay. This is a dynamic list. The engineer or the person in PDM is presented with a list, and if they have entered in a job number in the past, the list is actually shown here. If they're on a new job and they're on like a 6001 job, they have the ability to enter in a new list. Okay, now this list is a special list. All right, this, I'm going to go into the admin tool for a second here. This list is controlled by this gibberish up here, which in the grand scheme of things is really going back into the database and saying, oh, you know what have you typed in the past? It's not a list that you want the administrator to have to go in and update, once a week or once a month. We want to give the engineers the ability to either pull from an existing list or add to it if need be. And what this does is this actually goes back in and will search all of the information that's ever been typed into that field and present a list. So you can see this list here now has the PR 6001 that I just added. So if I were to go to a different folder, and I come over here, this list, if I actually save this thing, I have the, I knew that was going to happen. I have a 1 minute timeout This doesn't update live; it updates every 1 minute. So I should actually give it the minute that it needs. um, all right, there we go. So now this list has been updated based on information that's already been that was entered in previously. So it's not something an administrator has to worry about. It is a um, dynamic field. So those are all different ways to enter in some data automatically. Now, there are a number of instances where data for different parts needs to be slightly different. So I have a standard parts directory. Well, standard parts or commercial off-the-shelf parts uh, might require some different information um, for me to capture than a part that I would design from scratch. First note is I'm a one-man show. I don't even do real engineering work anymore, but this vault is my baby. And even as a one-man show, I have a design library full of off-the-shelf components. Okay, so this is a real-world example. If an engineer in January downloads a part from McMaster and puts it into the vault as a commercial part, we want to be able to find that part really quickly and easily. So we're going to give them some extra power to do that. As a real-world example, I actually have in my download directory a couple of McMaster parts. All right, so this is live. Let's do this. Let's go into my bearings. As you can see, I've downloaded a lot of McMaster parts over the years. Um, we'll actually take it from our download directory and dump it into here. All right. Now the reason I chose this directory has a different data card. So we have different requirements for different types of files. Right? In this case, this is a library part, and I have just some really standard information. So, for instance, um, the drop-down lists here are um, dynamic, very much like that paint spec that I just used. And as I realized this, I was supposed to do this guy first. Let's put this guy in. Let's go to fasteners, dump this guy in here. Okay. So this guy is a screw file. Now all these here are deactivated right now, even though the file is checked out to me. So I have the ability to do classify this as a screw. I have a list of known threads. The length is a typed in length. All right. Head type, Philister head, drive, slotted. All right. This is all information that is being captured, once again, just for the search capability. Vendor, well, I use McMaster a lot. They're already in my list. The only thing I actually would have to type in manually here is the part number, the McMaster part number. Okay, a lot of people um, still go to McMaster's webpage because the search algorithms in McMaster will help them find the part number they're really interested in. All right. In this case here, I'm capturing the fact that it's a Philister head screw 440, and I'm capturing the length. I'll be able to search my own vault and find existing downloaded files without needing to re-download, which is a bad idea, or go to McMaster's site to grab to use their search algorithm either. So just giving them this ability enhances our search. Now, um, the design library, once we have it built into our vault, which by the way, I'm a really big fan of having a design library in the vault. Um, if I were to come in here, and grab a small little assembly. How does it work from a SolidWorks user perspective? Number one, the um, the library itself can be refreshed on login. All right, so the user logs in the morning, the system verifies that the library is actually there. If they even go into offline mode, the files will still be there. All right, and if I went into there we go. Let's pop this guy open. So PDM enhances it. If I come in here, this is my PDM-based library, and if I were to come into, say, my rod ends, all right, so I want to put a rod into this tube nut here, all right, just with the hover. These are stored with McMaster numbers, but you can see how PDM captures my description. The description is shown right here in the design library. All right, so if you weren't familiar with what number you were looking for, you can actually just read the info. You can quickly drag and drop this guy in as well. All right, so if I click, drag, drop, I'm reusing that data, and that's even without searching. If I needed to search, I have access to the PDM search directly from inside of SolidWorks as well. I'll spare you the mating up of this component. It's just a SolidWorks function at that point. The real goal was to have the data available to me as I was accessing these guys. All right, same thing with any of these guys. You can just read down right through the descriptions. They're populated there as well. Now, this card that I displayed here for my library files has one extra piece of functionality, and I didn't point it out, but you can see how there's this extra field over here. Okay, the description field up here right now is a manual operation, but we have the ability to do what I'll call a concatenation, because that's what Excel calls it. The ability to select through the radio buttons, the drop downs, the entered in length here, and actually have it build a description for us. All right, this helps not only in searching, but it does help in bill of material management as well. You want the proper description in your bill of materials. Just to give you an idea how this works, we can take different pieces of the data card, and using what's called an input formula, we can enforce a description the way we deem it to be proper. So we can grab it. You can see here, threads and fastener versus head type. It's going to give us the same description every time. This also works very well for people who have description line 1, description line 2 for the parts that they model from scratch, they design from scratch. A lot of people do that for the SOLIDWORKS title block fields. They want 2 different lines, but for the bill of material, they want it to be a single line. This little option here works out just as well for them. Okay. Now, all right. I had a fancy. Okay. Verification. We can capture all this data. We can also verify that engineers are filling it out. Okay, so I have in my project directory here, I have a small part and drawing that are completely designed, ready to be manufactured as far as I'm concerned. All right, if I look at the data card, you can see the description's blank. There's a bunch of stuff that's that might be missing. In this example here, this is a work in process, which in my vault happens to be what I call the very first state, never been released. It's just a work in progress. As the engineer were to submit this for approval, right, to have either a peer or a manager review this, we now have some warnings up in the dialog box here, and the ability to change state has been removed. If you tried this years ago, the warnings that were put forth to the engineer were uh, not well worded at all. It basically just said there was some missing data. A couple of years ago, they changed the warnings to be much more descriptive. So as a manager, you can actually verify any piece of data on the card is actually filled out. You could verify, I've got some people who verify material, description, and a couple of other options there. This is actually done in the workflow piece. All you're doing is checking for, you're putting a condition on the workflow that says what these variables cannot be. So that this way the engineer is prompted to go back and actually add in descriptions. All right. Now, there's some quick ways to do it, and there's not a lot of work involved. It's information that's good anyway. It's going to help our search, but the uh, workflow will help us verify that we've actually got the information in there. Okay. So we have automated ways to capture data. We have drop-down lists, so we don't have to type in a lot of data. We've got modified drop-down lists that'll actually query the entire previously entered in fields and enhance um, um, that list for us. We've got all the different ways to capture the data. Uh, to reuse it, we really have to search. Now, the search, if you've played around with the search, has a ton of options, almost too many options to if you're not comfortable or familiar with it, there's almost too many options on how to find files. All right, so searches are actually built using the same interface that cards are built. So we can actually create a search card that takes away some of the less frequently used items. The original search card with all the extra data is still there, but here we have a search card that's been cleaned up and modified for the most common used items. Okay, um, so that way you can definitely find what it is you're looking for. The other option, the original search card with all of the options, has some really good what I'll call logical searching. And I won't go into all the big list, the two items at the top of the list, and or. If you want to find something and you want it to be this condition and this condition, or this condition or this condition, this does have that option. Now, in PDM Professional, you can actually just ping your PDM admin and say, look, build me this search. I need to search on these things all the time. All right? The PDM admin can then save it as a favorite so that people who aren't comfortable with this big long drop down can be presented with a simplified version of it so that it's already pre-configured for the searches that they run most frequently. All right. Let's do this. I have one last, and it's 11:28, and I have one last little piece that I will show you for um, reusing some of your files. All right, the one of the one of the things I've run into in the past, and I'm just going to do this part quickly, is people know that the um, the file exists, and they know it was originally derived from, oh, it's the bracket I used on the machine from 5 years ago, um, and the the file has been modified and used on a new machine, but they know where it came from. Um, there are there's a technique inside of PDM that you can actually create like a historical link between files. If you go into SOLIDWORKS and do SOLIDWORKS file save as, you're creating a brand new widget. It has no link to anything. In certain instances, though, it would be nice to know that I'm creating a brand new part based off of this part right here, and I want the two files to have some sort of a link. I want to be able to trace the history. Where did this thing come from? Well, PDM a couple of years ago put in what they call branch and merge, and this is not its intended use, but a branched file um, will maintain a link to the original. So let's say I'm going to give this guy a new number. So I'm going to take the part file and the 2D drawing. I'm going to say rename it with serial number. All right. What it's going to do is it's going to create two new files for me, a new part, new drawing. All right. And I'm going to call this derivative, if I could type. Okay. So this is taking the place of the traditional SOLIDWORKS file save as. It's doing two files in once. They're going to be related to one another. And if I say branch, oops, this guy now has a link, and you can do this from the original or from the one that was copied out. You can trace where these files came from. So you know that the 1481, well, it was originally a 1301, but we modified it a little bit. So we've got kind of a link between these files that PDM can maintain for us. So we have a historical reference there. Okay. All right. So that was something that wasn't in my PowerPoint because that was actually just a something I was going to play around with this morning. Thought it might be valuable. All right. So that actually brings us to the end of the content